Welcome to our class on Chassidus. We're going to be learning a beautiful Chassidic discourse from the Rebbe on this week's Torah portion. The name of the Chassidic discourse is called the Yitain Lecha, which the Rebbe said on Shabbos Parshas Shavua, which that year was the Shabbos that blessed the month of Kislev. It was also Erev Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Rosh Chodesh was on Sunday in the year Tav Shin Chav Daled, 58 years ago. So again, the Chassidic discourse is based on the verse that says in this week's Torah portion, the Yitain Lecha Elokim, the tremendous blessings that Yitzchok is giving to Yaakov Avinu, and he says Hashem should give you mitala shamayim umishmani haaretz. So the Rebbe asked a simple question. These are the blessings that Yitzchok is giving Yaakov. So if it's blessings, why does it say the name Elokim? We know God has many names. The most powerful name is Yud Kei Vav Kei. So why does he use the name of Elokim, which is more judgment, which is more limited? And the question becomes even stronger because we know when it comes to the priestly blessings, where God instructed the priests to bless the Jewish people, so what does it say in the blessing? Yivarecha Hashem. God should bless you, which name? Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that's the source of all the blessings. So seemingly over here it should have said, Vayitin Lecha, Yud Kei Vav Kei, not necessarily the Shem Elokim. And the Rebbe says, even though we know there's a certain opinion that says Mitala Shemayim is referring to what? Mikra, the Torah Shebeksav, the written law. Mishmani Eretz is referring to Mishnah, Torah Shebal Peh. So that's referring to what? The blessings are about Torah. And when it comes to Torah and Parshas Yisro, what does it say? Vayidaber Elokim es kol dvarim eila. It uses the name Elokim in reference to Torah. So therefore it would make sense why using the name Elokim. But nevertheless, Rebbe says, but the fact is that's only one insight. But the simple meaning is Mitala Shemayim Mishmani Aretz is physical, materialistic blessings. So if it's physical blessings, why does it use the name Elokim? Why doesn't it use the name Yud Kei Vav Kei? And Rebbe says, even if you're going to say that's referring to Torah, the blessings are in reference to Torah, so it's also not understood. What did the blessings accomplish? Later on, we received the Torah from Hashem. Now, even though you're going to say the Torah we received from Hashem, that came from on high, that's a gift from Hashem from heaven. But the blessing was the Torah that we do our work. That's the blessing for. So the Rebbe says also not understood because we know the fact is Avram Avinu, he sat and he learned Torah. Yitzchok sat and learned Torah. Yaakov also sat and learned Torah before he received the blessings. So what is V'yitin Lecha adding? Obviously there's a blessing. What is it adding if they're already learning Torah? Also the Rebbe says we have to understand, when did Yaakov receive the blessings from Yitzchak? After Yaakov walked over to Yitzchak and Yitzchak smelled the fragrance of Yaakov Avinu, which is a very, very high level of fragrance. He smelled the fragrance of Gan Eden, etc. So what is the connection? Only after he smelled the fragrance did he give him the blessings. So the Rebbe says we're going to understand this based on a Chassidic discourse from the Alter Rebbe, which in that year, 58 years ago, was 150 years of the Alter Rebbe's passing. So now it'll be over 208 years of his passing. And in a book, which the Rebbe calls a bichel in Yiddish, which is actually a manuscript, or a handwritten manuscript of the Alter Rebbe's son, the Mittler Rebbe, which has footnotes of the Tzemach Tzedek. So we're talking a heavy manuscript here. It's a teaching from the Alter Rebbe, written by the Mittler Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe, with footnotes from the Tzemach Tzedek. And he brings this verse, V'yitin Lecha, and he asks the same question. Why does it say Shem Elokim? So you see, this is an age-old question in the world of Kabbalah. And also he asks another question. The question he asked that when Yaakov went to get the blessing, so we know that he put on the garments of Esav. And so Yaakov felt the Cyrus, the hear from Esav, and that's what caused him to get the blessings. If he didn't have that garment, he would think he's Yaakov, he wouldn't give him the blessings. So the Alter asks, why is it that Yaakov specifically got the blessings through the medium of the Cyrus, the hears of Esav? So the Alter brings from Shir Hashim, from Song of Songs, from King Solomon, he brings the verse that says, "My yofis and my namas abba b'tainugim," how beautiful and how sweet it is, the love of delights. So he says, the Alter asks a simple question. It says, referring to Ava, love, tainugim, tainug. Now we know in the world of the spheroids, so the highest sphere is Keser. In Keser there's two levels. The higher level is Tainug, and the lower level is Rotzain. So when you're referring to Tainug, you're referring to the highest sphere of Keser, and in Keser itself, you're referring to the higher part in Keser. Now, the spheres exist in all the worlds: Atzilas, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, etc. Now, so the author asks a simple question: on the high level of Tainug, in real Tainug, real pleasure, the way it's sitting in Keser, what does it mean? Tainugim, plural of pleasures. On such a high level, there's no plural. It's pleasure. It's real pleasure. There's no multiple types of pleasure. It's pure. So Rebbe explains, what does that mean? Even though we know there's different types of pleasures that we have. For example, when you eat something, there's pleasure. There's tainug from eating certain things. Or for example, when you smell something, there's a certain pleasure in smelling beautiful fragrances. Or for example, you see a beautiful painting, a beautiful picture, there's a pleasure you received. Wow, it's beautiful, it's very, very nice. Or for example, someone sings beautifully. So there's different, so it creates a tainug, it creates a pleasure. In other words, so you see there is different levels of tainug. So what's the question that why does it say tainugim? There's multiple, you see there's different levels. The Rebbe explains very simple. Where do we say there's different levels of pleasures, different types of pleasures? Eating, drinking, smell, seeing something, voice, etc. That's in the creations of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Why? Because in the world of Asiya, we'll start from the bottom, there's different things. God is concealed the most, so there's different areas of pleasure because of the concealment. The same thing in Yetzira, where there's also concealment, not as much as Asiya, and the same thing in Bria. So since in each one of these worlds, the God is, so to speak, concealed, so therefore you can experience different types of tainug. Why? Because Bria, Yetzira, Asiya goes in the category of the world where God and the world is, so to speak, separate. You see a world, you have to look for God. However, in the world of Atzilus, and we know in the world of Atzilus, that's the closest world to Hashem. It's called Atzilus from Eitzel, close to Hashem. On a spiritual level means Achdus Pshuta, you have pure oneness. It's totally one with Hashem. So when you're dealing with one with Hashem, so there's one tainug, there's one pleasure, the pleasure of Hashem. What does it mean, tainugim, multiple pleasures? So the author explains as follows. So it doesn't mean, obviously, that there's different types of tainug, from seeing, from hearing, from smelling, from voice, etc. Because obviously in the world of Atzilus, it's all one. But what does it mean that there's tainugim plural? Not multiple types of tainug, but in tainug itself, in the pure tainug itself, there's two components. What does it mean there's two components in the tainug itself? There's the way you experience tainug, and I'll say it in Hebrew and I'll translate in the way of oir yashar, a light which comes straight down, and then there's a tainug which comes from the level of oir chayzer, a light that gets returned. What does that mean? So the Rebbe is going to explain each one. So again, just to recap, what the author is explaining is that when we say tainug in the world of Atzilus, there's one tainug. In the one tainug, there's two levels. There's a level of yashar and there's a level of chayzer. What's the difference? The author explains it. The Rebbe explains as follows, based on the author explains it in this classic Chassidic discourse. Yashar means it's a straight light. What does that mean? The light is drawn down, and the vessel of intellect and the vessel of our heart, of our emotions, are able to receive it. So, for example, when you see something beautiful, wow, you see it, you enjoy it, it's beautiful. It's simple. It's a simple pleasure. It's not complicated. Or, for example, you hear a beautiful voice singing, and you appreciate it. So that's a pleasure that comes down, you appreciate it, it's simple. Or for example, let's say you hear good news. So there's a lot of pleasure by hearing good news. Now, there's different types of good news, but we're talking about a simple good news. You hear something, that's not overwhelming good news. Simple good news. Now, you're able to receive it. That's called yashar. So again, to recap, tainug yashar means that the intellect and your heart is able to receive it, accept it, connect to it, and not overwhelm you. That's yashar. Yashar means a light that comes in that's not overwhelming. In this case, tainug that we have, pleasure that we have, that's not overwhelming. Then there's a level of tainug which is considered choizer. What does that mean? That means there's a type of pleasure that our intellectual and emotional capacity, it's too much for us. It's too much tainug. For example, the example the Rabbi uses is when you hear, for example, good news like suddenly, out of the blue, something you weren't expecting, and you were totally shocked of the news, right? Shocked good news. So what happens then is you hear it, but then what happens is that the news goes back to its source. Why? Because it's too much for the person to handle. People can faint with such great news. Let's say, for example, it can be many examples. Let's say you're waiting for a family to come that's been, lost for who knows how long, and you possibly thought they died. Who knows what happened to them? And all of a sudden you hear, guess what they hear? You can go into a faint. Why? Because it's too much to handle. That's called Chayzer, which means, it's tainug. You're sure you're excited. It's a tremendous pleasure, but it's too much, and you can faint because of it. So based on this, the Alter Rebbe explains that's what it says tainugim, a double type of pleasure. What does that mean? It's referring to the tainug of choizer, which is too much to handle, and then there's a tainug which is yasher, you're able to handle it. So that's the two levels of tainugim. And that's why the verse says in Shir Hashirim, Ava b'tainugim. Tainugim plural. Again, plural, not different types of tainug, because when you're dealing with atzilus, there's only one tainug, but there's one that you're able to receive and appreciate and connect, yashar, and there's one that's called chayzer. Now, but the verse says, Ava, love with pleasure. So in other words, Rebbe says, based on this, what do you see? That just like in tainugim, there's two levels of yashar and chayzer, one that you're able to achieve, connect to and appreciate, and one which is too much for you to handle. So the same thing also, you must say that since the Shir Hashem, King Solomon puts two words together, Ava, love, also has these two components. In other words, as follows. So first, the Rebbe gives an introduction to not only the fact that Abba says next to Tainugim, but the Rebbe is going to show you that Abba is connected to Tainug. How do we know that Abba is connected to Tainug? Because Ava, which is love, which is like all the emotions. Ava is an emotion. It comes from Chesed. So Ava, like all the emotions, where does the emotions come from? Emotions come from intellect. You meditate, you think about something, and then you get happy, and then you get inspired to do chesed or gvura, whatever it may be. So the midos, specifically in this case, Ava, chesed comes from seichel, comes from intellect. Where does intellect come from? So if you look at the siros, what's before chachma? That's where keser is, ratzon and tainug. So the flow is that it starts out in tainug, and from there you go into intellect, and from there you go into the emotions. So therefore, since the emotions come from intellect, which comes from tainug, so therefore in the midos, in the emotions, in our case in Abba, you have tainug connected to Abba. Why is that? Because that's where it ultimately comes from. Any pleasure you have came from intellect, it came from tainug. So you see that tainug and Abba are connected. So therefore, based on this, you see that not just like tainug, there's two components, yashar and chayzer. Therefore, obviously, in Abba you also have both components. In other words, in Abba you have the component of yashar and chayzer. In other words, there's two levels of love. What does that mean practically? And the Rebbe explains the two levels. So you have a level of love in Kabbalah. It's called Ava Kamayim, love like it flows like water. And then you have Ava, love that's like a huge flame that's burning. What's the difference? And the Rebbe says like this: love like water that's flowing, that's the type of love which is compared to yashar, where you're able to grasp it, comprehend it, connect to it, appreciate it. In other words, the love comes from tainug in a way of yashar. Tainug, which is part of Kesser, goes through chachma, it goes to the midos. That's the one level. And that's why it's called love like water, because it flows naturally from tainug through chachma into your emotions. How does it flow? It flows calmly, it flows coldly. In other words, it comes from Almaida Lamata. It's coming straight from tainug, intellect, into your emotions. So again, the first level of Ava is Ava Kamayim. Ava yashar. It comes down straight from tainug into your emotions. But then there's a second level. Ava karish be'esh, the love like a fire. What is that? That's connected to the idea, just like in Tainugim, Choizer. What does that mean? That goes milmata l'mayla, from down here on high. What does that mean? Because it comes down from Tainug, it does come from Tainug, but it comes down in a way of Choizer, which means it's too much. You can't handle it. And therefore, when you're experiencing such a level of love, such intensity of love, which is the love is called like a fire, you can't grasp it. Water you can drink slowly, you sip it, it's enjoyable. You can't drink, you can't touch fire, you run from fire. So that's what inspires you. It does inspire you, and it's called milmata l'mayla, Choizer. So that's why it says Ava b'tainugim. Just like in Tainug, there's two levels, Yashar and Choizer. The same thing in Ava, there's Ava Kamayim and Ava Karish Be'esh, which is connected to the idea of the Tainugim of Yashar and Choizer. Now, based on this introduction of the two levels of Tainug and the two levels of Ava, Yashar and Choizer and Ava Kamayim and Ava Karish Be'esh, so based on this, the Alter Rebbe explains the quality of the patriarchs, Avram and Yitzchok, which are, even though they're physical human beings, but on a spiritual level, what does Avram represent? What does Yitzchak represent? They represent the midos, the emotions of the world of Atzilus. That's in Atzilus, the emotions, Chesed and Gvura. Avram is Chesed, and Yitzchak what is Gvura. But in their source, they're both coming from Tainug of Atik. So in its source, the Avram and Yitzchak both come in Tainug and Atik, and then it goes down to the world of intellect, and then in the world of emotions, Avram represents in a strong way the midah of Chesed of Atzilus, and Yitzchak represents the midah of Gvura of Atzilus. In other words, Avram in his source, in a revealed way, he's Chesed of Atzilus. In his source, he's Chesed of Atik, even though it's not carved out, but in its source, it's Chesed of Atik. In a revealed way, it's Chesed of Atzilus. And therefore, based on that Avram is Chesed of Atzilus in a revealed way. And in its source, it's Chesed of Atik. That's why we say, Zechoir Av, remember our father referring to what? Avram Avinu, Nimshach Acharecha Kamayim, he was drawn to you like water. And we already learned, what does it mean drawing like water? It's come down, B'derech Yashar, in a straight path. So Avram's source is Chesed of Atik, goes through Chesed Atzilus, and it comes down in a straight path. Yitzchak, on the other hand, he's Gvura. What does that mean? Gvura of Atzilus, but in its source, he's Gvura of Atik, in Keser Atik and Gvura of Atik, which is obviously a very, very high level. It's hard to contain it, because you're dealing with Gvura of Atik, Gvura of Atzilus, it's very, very strong. So that comes down in a way of Choizer. It's too much for us to handle. However, so even though it's too much to handle, but where is the real power? Where is the intensity of the flow of energy? It comes from Gvura. And we know Gvura comes from the expression of Tagboiris. It's very, very strong, a lot of energy. Tagboiris Achayas. So again, Avram Avinu represents Chesed of Atzilus, which comes from Chesed of Atik. Yitzchak represents Gvura of Atzilus, which comes from Gvura of Atik. Avram comes down Kamayim like water, Yashar. Yitzchak comes down Choizer, Ava Karish Be'esh. But obviously, the one that's really more powerful is the one from Yitzchak, because it's coming from Gvura, much stronger. And like the Rebbe says, it's brought down in many Chassidic discourses about the idea of Gvuris Geshamim. When the rain comes, it comes from Gvura. What does that mean, Gvura? Because the real flow, when Geshem comes down, when it rains, it doesn't come from Chesed. The real strong flow comes from Gvura. And that's why in the prophets it says, in reference to Yitzchak Avinu, it says, V'arba ezaroi, v'etan lo Yitzchak. So Avraham Avinu, he had first one son Yishmael, and Hashem said, V'arba, I'm going to multiply. There's going to be much more. I'm going to give you Yitzchak. Why? Because Yitzchak is arba, from multiplicity, a lot, in abundance. And therefore the blessings have to come specifically from Yitzchak. Why? Because Yitzchak is the one that had the intensity of the flow of energy, much more than Avraham Avinu. And that's why we also say in reference to Rosh Hashanah, we say Zeh HaYoim, this is the day, which we also mean this is the day. From here comes out the tremendous flow of energy for all Seder Istalshos, from all levels, Atzilus, Pri, Yetzirah, Asiyah. You know, it's the beginning of Hashem's creation of the world, Zikaron Le'er Rishon. And our avodah is, because we're dealing with such intensity, So the problem is that since the intensity of a flow is coming from Gvura of Atzilus, which comes from Gvura of Atik, it's too much for us to handle. Our job is, our spiritual work is, in Hebrew, I'll say it in Hebrew, I'll translate, is Lahamti Kagvurais, to sweeten the powers, because if it's just Gvura, we can't handle it. But once we sweeten it, then we can internalize it. And like Rebbe says, it's explained in many Chassidic discourses in reference to Rosh Hashanah, that Rosh Hashanah Hashem is creating the world. This flow is very, very intense. It's coming from Gvura Atik. Our job is to sweeten it. And since it's Rosh Hashanah, it's the beginning, so it's coming with a tremendous intensity, which is huge. Our job is to sweeten it, and then we can obviously enjoy it. Now, so how do we enjoy it? How do we sweeten the Gvura? If we're going to have it intense, we want the intensity, we want it to come from Yitzchak, Gvura of Atzilus, and Gvura of Atik, but on the other hand, we want to be able to appreciate it. It shouldn't just bounce out of us. So that's why it comes through the process of Sairos, the process of the hears. What does that mean? Because the light, the way it is, we can't draw it down. It's too powerful. However, when you have a filter of the Cyrus of the here, then you're able to draw it down because it's coming down like drip irrigation. It's coming down slowly. How does that come through? It comes through, even though it's from the skull, that's where everything comes from, but you have obviously a filter that so to speak filters it through the Cyrus, and therefore you need the Cyrus. So based on this, there was explaining why, in order for Yaakov to receive those powerful blessings from Yitzchok Avinu, which came from Gvura of Atik, what had to happen is he had to wear the clothes of Esav that was Seiros, the hair, because if he didn't have the hair, it would be too strong. And the Seiros, the Cyrus, the hair was able to filter it out, and he was able to receive it and able to internalize it. So the Rebbe says, 1 second. What are we dealing with? Who's receiving the blessings? We're dealing with an amateur. We're dealing with Yaakov Avinu. Now we know in the Torah it says, Yaakov says, he tells his mother, I'm very, very smooth. I don't have any hair like Esav had. That's the simple insight. What does that mean spiritually? What he's saying is, when he's saying he's smooth, it means he's higher than Cyrus. He doesn't need the hair. He can get it directly. Why? Because what's Yaakov's source? Just like we learned that Avram's source is Chesed, and Yitzchak's source is Gvura, Yaakov's source is Kaveh Tzai. And because he's Kaveh Tzai, he literally goes from the bottom to the top, from top to the bottom. And he actually goes higher than Avraham Avinu, higher than Yitzchak, higher than Ratzai, higher than Shuv, higher than Ar Chayzer, we said it's so powerful from Yitzchak, higher than Ar Yashar, obviously from Avraham Avinu. He's higher than Tayu, he's higher than Tikkun, all these heavy levels, and that's why he's called Ish Chalak. So, but if that's the case, since Yaakov is so powerful, he goes straight to the top because he's a centered sphere. The Paris goes all the way to the top. So why do he need the Cyrus? So the Rebbe explains, but nevertheless, even though in source Yaakov is much higher, but when Yaakov became revealed in the world of Atzilus, he's Tiferes, and Tiferes is lower and after Chesed and Gvura. In other words, it's the third sphere after Chesed and Gvura. In other words, Tiferes receives from Chesed and Gvura. So even though, again, in its source, Yaakov is very, very high, but because he receives from Chesed and Gvura, so in order for him to receive the blessings of Yitzchak, which were very, very powerful, he needed to have the Cyrus. He needed to have the filter, that through that he was able to receive the powerful blessings from his father of Yitzchak that came from Gvura of Atik, that went through the Cyrus, and therefore he was able to connect to it, and he was able to relate to it, and he was able to internalize, because Yaakov in a revealed way from Tiferes, even though in the source he's much higher. And Rebbe explained just now a very powerful Kabbalistic explanation. He says like this. Rebbe explains, he uses the analogy of seichel, intellect. So we know when it comes to intellect, there's different levels. There's different levels of intellect. For example, so we know that when Hashem created the world, there's 4 different levels where there's 4 different levels of energy. There's doimim, the inanimate, rock, sand, etc. Tzemeach, things that grow. Chai, things that are alive, animals, etc. And there's medaber, the ones that can speak, referring to human beings. Now, Shlomo says like this: in Seichel, you have Chai, the level of Chai that exists in Seichel and intellect. You have the level of Tzemeach, things that grow, that lives, that exists in the level of intellect. And then you also have Doimim in Seichel. What does that mean practically? Shlomo says like this: in Seichel, in intellect, Chabad, Chachman, Bina, V'das, there's a component of Chai. in there you have chai as well. What does that mean? In other words, the fact that intellect has an impact on every one of the limbs in our body, that's because there's a chayus in seichel. The level of chai, the level of life, is in seichel as well. For example, you have to write something. How do you write? It's coming from your brain, what you're writing. But who writes it? Your hand writes it. The hand writes based on the intellect that tells you what to do. Or for example, you want to go somewhere. The intellect tells your foot to move, and it's when you start walking. In other words, the minute in your brain it tells you to walk or write something, you move your hand, then you move your foot. What is that coming from? Because in seichel chai, life, when your hands are moving, that's life. When your feet are moving, that's life. So in seichel, there's a component of chai. That's the first thing. Now, what happens? So you see clearly that in intellect, it has chai, and therefore your hand moves, your feet move, etc. But what happens all of a sudden, your mind, your intellect says, you know what? The hair on your hand or any other part of your body should stand up. It doesn't stand up. Why? It doesn't stand up. Because the hair is not connected to chai. Your hands and your feet are connected to chai of seichel. And then because it's connected to chai of intellect, so when your intellect says move your hand, move your feet, it moves. However, your hair on your body is not connected to chai of intellect. And therefore, if it thinks to stand up, it doesn't stand up. What is it connected to? What part of the intellect? It's connected to tzameach. And it grows, obviously, ultimately through the power of intellect. In other words, it's not the level of chai, it's not a level of tzameach. And it receives its vitality not from the highest level of seichel, which is chai, but at least from a lower level. Moisrei moichem retrieves its vitality from the level of tzameach. And you also have, obviously, the filter of the skull of the head. And therefore, it doesn't move. However, even though it doesn't move, but it's still connected. It's connected to tzameach. And the proof is that it's connected to it, because the fact that you pull your hair, you're going to say, ow, it hurts. Why does it hurt? If it's not, because it is connected. It's not connected on a level of chai where you're going to cause it to move, but you are connected where if you pull it, it's going to hurt you. And because it is connected to it. But obviously it's a lesser connection. It's lesser connection means lesser vitality. It's not the level of chai, it's the level of tzameach. And so because it does have a connection, it doesn't have like chai, but it does have a connection, so you're able to draw energy through the siros. There is a connection, not as powerful connection. And because it so to speak tones it down, it's like a filter process, it's a symptom. So therefore the blessings can come, the blessings of the powerful blessings could come specifically through the siros. Because the siros is not connected in such a strong level that you would also have a jolt. It's able to process it in a way that you can relate to it. But what if you didn't have the hair, and you didn't have that process that diminishes the energy, you wouldn't be able to receive it. So the Rebbe explains to you, literally, according to Kabbalah, why specifically the siros work. Because the siros represents a connection, but a connection that the energy flow is much less. And because the energy flow is much less, you're able to receive the Oyer Chayzer, and it does not affect you in a jolting way. Now, the Rebbe says this is all heavy Kabbalah we just learned. Tainug, Siros, etc. Or Yashar Chayzer. But we all know when it comes to learning Chassidus, the goal is not just to go on a beautiful mystical journey, which is very, very nice, but everything has to come down practically. In other words, how does it affect my life? In a practical way, in terms of I'm going to serve Hashem better, I'm going to become a better human being, etc. So the Rebbe explains like this, that generally speaking, the avodah on a practical level of Yashar, that's the avodah of a tzaddik. What means avodah of a tzaddik? A person that does what he's supposed to, with no distractions, no struggles. You pray, you study, you do mitzvot. You're nice, you're kind, you're connected to Hashem, you love Hashem, etc. So Yashar is we call the avodah of a tzaddik. Doesn't mean it means whatever you're doing with focus, with clarity, with no drama, with no distractions. That's the avodah of a tzaddik. That's Yashar. What's the avodah of Chayzer? Chayzer is the avodah of a Baal Tshuva, someone that struggles with the relation with Hashem, but nevertheless you remain strong and you stay connected with the struggle, so the fire is much stronger there, and that's the avodah of a Baal Tshuva. So a tzaddik is connected more to the avodah of Ur Yasher, the straight light that comes in, and the Baal Tshuva is more connected to the most powerful light of Ur Chayzer. There are quotes in the Zohar, it says, B'chei Yatid, the Baal Tshuva has much more energy. Like, for example, just like Ur Chayzer, which comes from Gvuros. So what do we see? That they have avodah of tzaddik, which is Ur Yasher. The avodah of the Baal Tshuva is Ur Chayzer. So based on this, the Rebbe explains something very, very powerful. Yitzchok Avinu, he had two children, Yaakov and Esav. Why? And we know, but Yitzchak, we know, his goal was he wanted to give those blessings to Esav. And the question is, why do you want to give the blessings to Esav? He knew that Esav was not behaving the way he's supposed to. He knew that God wasn't his first priority. He knew he was a hunter and doing whatever he was doing out there. But nevertheless, Yitzchak wanted to give the blessings to Esav. Why? So we know the simple reason is, it says in the Torah, he fed him. He brought him a nice lunch, a nice dinner. But what does that mean, he brought him dinner? It wasn't the physical food, because he saw that he had tremendous holy sparks of holiness in him, in Esav. And Yitzchak, because he was from Gvura, he had all this powerful energy. He wanted to bring that powerful energy of Ur Chayzer into Esav. And by bringing that powerful energy into Esav, he will inspire him to return to Hashem. He will inspire him to do tshuva. And how does that happen? It happens specifically through the tzimtzum, through bringing down this powerful energy into Esav. And that was his goal. His goal was to bring the powerful energy of Ur Chayzer into Esav and inspire him to do tshuva. But the fact is, who got the blessings? Yaakov got the blessings. Why did Yaakov get the blessings? If Yaakov is on the level of a tzaddik, why does he need the powerful Ur Chayzer? He could have had Ur Yasher straight from Avraham Avinu. Why does he have to give him those powerful blessings? But the Rebbe says, no, Yaakov needed the blessings. Why? Because Hashem wanted that Yaakov should have both types of way of serving Hashem. He should serve Hashem on the level of a tzaddik, Ur Yasher, and also the avodah serving Hashem on the level of a Baal Tshuva, Ur Chayzer. However, in order for him to receive this powerful level of Ur Chayzer, he needed the vessel. What was the vessel to receive that powerful level for Yaakov? He needed the hair, like we've explained already before, because through the hair it tones it down, or the beautiful garments, the physical, materialistic, beautiful garments. Also, the question he asked me, why do you have to smell it? Because he needed the smell, the reich bagadav. He needed the smell, and through that it went. I was going to explain now why specifically the smell from his garments. So the Rebbe explains like this. What does it mean, the smell from the garments? It literally means v'reach, the smell of begad of his garments. Well, we know begadav can also mean boigdav. Boigdav means to like a trader, someone that's a trader. So it was, even though when Yaakov was wearing the garments, he was it wasn't really him; it was someone else. So the idea is to be a trader. In other words, what does a trader represent? Trader can go both ways. Yaakov was being dressed up like Esav. That's a trader. That's not really him. Also, someone that's sinning, that's a trader and comes back to Hashem. And as a trader, Begadav represents the idea of the ability to do tshuva, to return to Hashem, and to go ahead and transform the light from negative to positive. And through Reach Begadav, through being a trader, through going ahead and doing tshuva, that's the vessel to receive the greatest blessings. So when we do something wrong, we're all human, and then we become a traitor, we don't stick to doing something wrong, we do something right, then we're able to connect to the greatest blessings. And that's why it says, V'yitin l'cha Elokim, that Hashem will give it to you. Elokim referring to what level? Not Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is Ur Yasher, but Elokim, Tzimtzum. Elokim represents Tzimtzum. In other words, the goal was that Elokim, we should receive the blessings of Ur Yasher and Ur Chayzer. And like the Rebbe says, the goal was that not that Yaakov should only have Eretz Yisrael, the land of Hashem that wants to do the will of Hashem, and outside of Eretz Yisrael, which means that land that doesn't want to do the will of Hashem, that goes to Esav. No, even Yaakov, that ideally would love to have just the land of Israel, the place that's doing the will of Hashem. But he should also have a place outside of Israel, which means not doing the will of Hashem, so that he should be able to go down outside of Israel and transform the outside of Israel. And it should bring in the most powerful energy there. And that's why you see it's important, he needed specifically not only Yud Kei Vav Kei, the powerful light of Ur Yasher. He needed Ur Chayzer, because he needed to have not only the avodah of a tzaddik, he needed to have also the avodah of a Baal Tshuva. Not only the straight light, but he also needs to do the transformational light, a Boigdov. And based on the Shabbat finishes off, and he says, that's Pshat V'yitin L'cha Elokim. Elokim should give it to you, because by having Elokim, the powerful energy of Elokim, the powerful energy of Ur Chayzer, the powerful energy of Gvura of Atik, that gives you the power to break anything that's holding back the revelation of God. It's not enough Ur Yasher, it's not going to do it. You need Ur Chayzer to do it. And that's why it says, V'yitin L'cha Elokim, Mitala Shamayim, and as the commentary said, Mitala Shamayim is referring to what Mikra, learning the revealed part of the Torah, and the Nishmaniyat is referring to Mishnah, the oral part of the Torah, which is referring to Torah. Why? The question was, even before they learned Torah and they did mitzvahs, before this blessing, Avram learned, Yitzchok learned, Yaakov all learned Torah. So what's the big chiddush? What's the big novel idea? This blessing, Yitachal Lakim, reference to Torah. And Rebbe explained, because the fact is, until then, they learned Torah. But what was lacking was mishpat. What was lacking was tzedakah. Like it says in reference to Yaakov in Psalms. Mishpat with tzedakah v'Yaakov atasisam. In other words, what is the idea of mishpat? That you should judge yourself. And they'll see what you need, and the rest you should give away for tzedakah. Or, like, for example, tzedakah is, we know that what's the idea of tzedakah? Tzedakah is to do what Hashem wants. And you should do it in a way of Kabbalah soil. You're accepting whatever Hashem wants you to do. And you should do the mitzvos, and mitzvos we know it's ma'isa mitzvos, the action of mitzvos. So what does action mean? Literal meaning means doing the mitzvos, the physical mitzvos. But ma'isa actually means of ma'isa, you force yourself to do tzedakah, you force yourself to do more. So the component of yitin lecha is for the effort part. And as until then they learned Torah, Ur Yashar. But the goal was to bring into Torah mishpat, to do what Hashem wants with Kabbalah soil, to do it in a way of tzedakah. And the fact is that Yitzchak, which represents Gevura of Atzilus, but more importantly Gevura of Atik, he was able to give the power to Yaakov that not only they should learn Torah, but we should learn Torah and do mitzvahs and do tzedakah, and that has all connected to Bereich Begadov, the fragrance from the clothing, which again Begadov we said means to be like a trader. What does it mean of being a trader? You're a trader in anything of materialistic in the world, and you don't get distracted from the materialistic world. Even though you're living in a world, but you're a trader. It's not the world. It's not everything, and you break the nature of the world. And by breaking the nature of the world, you're able to be a vessel to receive the powerful light of Ur Chayzer. So obviously it's a very, very powerful Chassidic discourse. You see the tremendous blessings of the Yitin Lecha, that we have the power from the highest places of Gvura of Atik, and we need specifically Elokim, because the idea is not only to have Ur Yasha, but to have Ur Chayzer. Hashem wants to have all the greatest blessings, to learn Torah, to do mitzvahs, to do it b'Kabbalah soil, and when we learn Torah and do mitzvahs, we do it b'Kabbalah soil, we draw down the greatest blessings, and we're connected to the greatest blessings in a real, meaningful way. Not only is it Ur Yasha we're able to relate to, but through the Cyrus, through the Tzimtzum, we're able to appreciate and enjoy the idea of Ur Chayzer, and the idea of connecting to God through Kabbalah soil. Have a great and blessed week. Shavua Tov. Looking forward to our next class in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh.
Moment of Wisdom. Sub-brief and life-changing moments. Join us. Subscribe to Moment of Wisdom channels on YouTube, Telegram, Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp.